Imagine a peaceful Saturday morning in Plano, Texas. The kind where sunshine bathes neatly trimmed lawns and children's laughter echoes from cul-de-sacs. Mr. Carter stepped out of his two-story brick home, his mind on nothing more than the simple chore of taking out the trash. Little did he know his quiet street was about to become a stage for a shocking confrontation. He hadn't even taken 10 steps when a strange trio appeared at the edge of his driveway. There stood Lisa Thompson, the HOA president, her face grim, flanked by two men in ill-fitting, tactical-style vests. Community enforcement patches were crudely stitched across their chests, but something felt terribly wrong. These weren't professionals. Their boots were scuffed, their vests mismatched, and their stances were too rigid, too practiced to be genuine. A chilling alarm bell rang in Mr. Carter's mind. Lisa's voice, sharp and rehearsed, pierced the morning calm. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk." He calmly set down the trash bag, his hands on his hips. "About what, exactly?" One of the men, a tall, pale figure with a shaved head and unreadable mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Community enforcement, you're violating neighborhood rules. We're here to detain you until the police arrive." "Detain him?" Mr. Carter repeated, a hint of amused disbelief in his tone. Lisa crossed her arms, her eyes flashing. "You've ignored every notice, Reginald. This has gone too far. We can't have someone undermining our community standards. These men are here to ensure your compliance." Mr. Carter's eyebrow rose as he glanced between Lisa and her so-called officers. "And what precisely are these grave charges?" The second man, shorter, bearded, and broad-shouldered, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "Property violations, non-compliance with HOA directives, unauthorized driveway alterations, loud gatherings, the list is extensive." Mr. Carter almost burst out laughing. "You seriously think that gives you the right to just walk onto my property and detain me?" The tall man's jaw tightened. "That's right. You can cooperate peacefully, or we'll make this much harder for you." The air grew heavy. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. A curtain twitched down the street, another, then another. Eyes watched from behind blinds. Phones were discreetly raised. Mr. Carter took a deliberate step forward, his voice a calm steel. "Let me make one thing crystal clear. There is no such thing as community enforcement. You are not law enforcement. You have no authority here, and you are trespassing on my property." Lisa's face flushed crimson. "Don't you dare lecture me about authority, Reginald. You think you're above the rules because of who you are. We've received genuine complaints, and I won't stand by and watch this neighborhood crumble." The bearded man shifted nervously, but his partner remained unyielding, his hand hovering near his belt, a silent threat. Mr. Carter tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. He'd encountered countless men like these in his career, wannabes, puffed up by a uniform and a stern expression, believing themselves untouchable. But what they didn't know was that he wasn't just a homeowner. He was a highly trained federal agent, a man who had spent years dismantling criminal organizations and interrogating individuals far more dangerous than these two imposters. Yet, he simply smiled. "You chose the absolute wrong driveway today." Lisa pressed closer, her voice rising in a desperate crescendo. "Don't test me, Reginald. These men can hold you until the police arrive, and then you'll be the one answering questions." That's when Mr. Carter let the trash bag fall. It split, a soda can clattering across the concrete, a sound that echoed not of surrender but of a man planting his feet, ready for a confrontation that could not end as Lisa envisioned. Neighbors peered from windows. A teenager across the street openly filmed. This was no longer just an HOA dispute. It was a public spectacle in the making. But despite the escalating tension, the real test of wills was yet to come. The taller man took another aggressive step, his boots scraping the concrete, trying to assert dominance. His mirrored shades reflected Mr. Carter's unruffled expression. But the imposter clearly yearned to prove himself. "Sir, do not make this difficult," he growled, his voice tight. "Your noncompliance gives us the right to escalate." Mr. Carter's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Escalate? You stand on my property with no badge, no legal authority, and absolutely no idea how deep a hole you're digging. You have 30 seconds to back away before you profoundly regret this little stunt." Lisa snapped her head towards him, her voice dripping with venom. You think threats will improve things? You've ignored letters, warnings, and fine. The HOA exists to maintain this neighborhood's safety and respectability. People like you, she cut herself off, her mouth tightening, as if she'd almost revealed too much. Mr. Carter's eyes narrowed instantly. People like me, huh? Be very, very careful how you finish that thought, Lisa. The bearded man nervously interjected, attempting to regain control. Look, this doesn't need to get ugly. Just come with us. We'll wait for the officers. Clear this up, and maybe they'll go easy on you. Officers? Mr. Carter asked flatly. Do you mean actual police? Or the fake badges you two probably ordered online? The taller man stiffened, but his partner glanced at Lisa with visible unease. She pushed forward, desperate to maintain the illusion. These men are authorized by the HOA board to ensure compliance. We don't have to answer to you. Mr. Carter chuckled softly, shaking his head. Lisa, listen to yourself. You brought two grown men in bargain bin tactical gear to my driveway. Do you honestly believe that's how the law works? By now, the audience had swelled. Curtains billowed in nearly every window, more phones appeared, and some neighbors even stepped onto their porches, openly filming. Mr. Carter's voice dropped, intended for the imposters, but audible to the captivated onlookers. Do you want to know what real authority looks like? It's not two men playing soldier. It's rigorous training. It's the law. It's absolute accountability. And I promise you, the real cops will be intensely interested in this little performance. The bearded man's throat bobbed, his bravado visibly eroding. But the tall one doubled down, stepping closer until he was mere inches from Mr. Carter. I am not playing. You're in violation. And if you resist, we will restrain you. Don't test me. Mr. Carter didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice calm yet razor-sharp. Son, I've dealt with cartel enforcers who were less reckless than you. Do yourself a massive favor and back off before this turns into something you'll never walk away from. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed the man's face. His aggressive posturing was cracking under the weight of Mr. Carter's unwavering composure. Lisa, refusing to concede an inch, shrieked, "Why should the rest of us abide by the rules while you do whatever you please? We have a system, Reginald. We have order. And if you won't respect it, then perhaps you don't belong here at all." Mr. Carter's gaze fixed on her. Respect isn't enforced with fake cops and threats, Lisa. It's earned. And right now, what you're doing isn't about rules. It's about control. Her words hit harder than she expected, her confidence momentarily faltering before she tightly folded her arms across her chest. The bearded man shifted his weight, his nerves fraying. Maybe we should wait in the street, he muttered to his partner. But the taller one shot him a fierce glare. No, we're not leaving. Mr. Carter let out a slow, deliberate exhale, assessing that. He knew their type, men who thrived on intimidation, mistaking fear for respect, and he knew precisely how to dismantle them without lifting a single fist. Tell me something, Lisa, Mr. Carter said evenly, turning his attention back to her. When you called these two clowns, did you truly think this through? Because the moment the real police arrive, and trust me, they are on their way, they won't be asking me the difficult questions. They'll be asking you why you believed you had the authority to stage an arrest. Lisa blinked, the color draining from her cheeks. From across the street, a voice boomed. Leave him alone, the shout echoed, transforming the HOA confrontation into a full-blown neighborhood standoff. Mr. Carter's eyes remained locked on the two men. This is your final opportunity. Walk away now, before this entire block watches you hauled off in handcuffs. The bearded man's face twitched, his resolve crumbling, but the tall one clenched his fists, unwilling to relinquish his illusion of power. Mr. Carter, however, knew what they didn't. This confrontation was only going to intensify, and the neighborhood was about to witness something far grander. The street buzzed with an electrifying energy. What began as a tense exchange on Mr. Carter's driveway had morphed into a live spectacle. Windows were now wide open, doors ajar, and people leaned over porches, phones held high, eager to capture every second of this unfolding drama. The Millers, a retired couple across the street, stood shoulder to shoulder on their porch. Miller shook his head, muttering loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, "I've never seen anything like it. What was she thinking, bringing fake police into our neighborhood?" His wife whispered back, "I always said Lisa would go too far one day." Mr. Carter caught fragments of their conversation but maintained his focus on the imposters. His mind, sharp and analytical, cataloged every detail: their sloppy gear, the tall man's nervous glances down the street, searching for backup that wouldn't arrive, the bearded man's restless, twitching hands. They weren't professionals. They were actors in a play rapidly falling apart. From the sidewalk, Kyle Peterson, a teenager Mr. Carter often saw shooting hoops, raised his phone higher and yelled, "Yo, Mr. Carter, you're live. Thousands are watching." The taller imposter snapped his head toward Kyle. "Put that down," he barked, taking a threatening step towards the boy. That was his critical mistake. Mr. Carter moved instantly, stepping between the man and the teen, his voice sharp, cold, and utterly steady. "You even think about touching that kid, and this ends right here, right now." The imposter froze, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that Mr. Carter was not intimidated, not even remotely. Lisa, flustered, tried to regain control. "This is a neighborhood matter. None of you should be interfering." Her words, however, only fueled the growing crowd. A woman with a baby on her hip shouted from a porch, "Neighborhood matter. It looks like harassment to me." More voices chimed in. "This is wrong. Where did you even find these guys? You can't arrest your neighbor for cutting his grass too short." The longer Lisa and her enforcers stood there, the more their control slipped away. What was intended to scare Mr. Carter had transformed into a scene where they were on trial, judged by the watchful eyes of every neighbor. Mr. Carter let the silence hang for a moment before speaking again. "Lisa, do you hear them? This is an order. This is chaos. And you, Lisa, created it." Her jaw clenched, but her voice trembled slightly. "You're twisting this, Reginald. You've always been a problem. Always bending the rules, ignoring the standards we worked so hard to build." He tilted his head, studying her. "No, Lisa. The real problem is that you confuse control with leadership. They are not the same thing." That line resonated through the block like a final verdict. Neighbors shifted, whispering, nodding in agreement. Phones continued recording, capturing every flicker of tension. The bearded imposter wiped sweat from his brow, visibly unraveling. "Look, man," he muttered under his breath, "maybe we should just go. This isn't worth it." But his partner hissed, "No, we finished this." The taller man squared his shoulders, trying to appear larger than life. "Last warning. You either come with us peacefully or we will use force." Mr. Carter almost laughed at the sheer absurdity. "You truly want to do this in front of every single witness on this street, with half a dozen cameras pointed directly at you? Go ahead, show the world who you really are." He faltered, his eyes darting nervously between the glowing phone screens and the rising murmurs. He could feel the crushing weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. Lisa stepped forward again, desperation lacing her voice. "Don't listen to him. He's manipulating all of you. He thinks because of his job." Mr. Carter cut her off sharply. "Careful, Lisa." His tone, though not raised, carried more authority than her loudest shout. "You absolutely do not want to finish that sentence." The crowd hushed, a collective intake of breath, as if everyone grasped the unspoken implication. Mr. Carter turned back to the imposters, lowering his voice just enough that they had to lean in. "Listen to me very carefully. You have two options right now. You can leave quietly and pray the police don't charge you with impersonation. Or you can continue pretending you have power, and this street will watch you get dismantled in real time." The bearded man swallowed hard, his eyes flickering to Lisa. She gave a tiny shake of her head, clinging to the illusion of control, but that control was slipping through her fingers like water. Across the street, Kyle shouted, "They're done, Mr. Carter. We all see it." His words further galvanized the crowd, voices rising in agreement. Mr. Carter remained perfectly still, allowing the neighborhood itself to become his most powerful ally. He didn't need to flex or threaten. The truth was exposing them, one camera angle at a time. But as the pressure mounted and the block transformed into a stage, the imposters made a choice that threatened to push the standoff into truly dangerous territory. The air was thick with tension, charged by the collective judgment of the neighborhood. Mr. Carter stood unyielding in his driveway, a pillar of calm, while the two men in vests fidgeted under the weight of 100 unseen eyes. For a fleeting second, it seemed they might back down. The bearded man's posture screamed, "Retreat," his feet shifting towards the street. But the taller one, Mark, with his shaved head and mirrored shades, wasn't ready to yield. He suddenly reached into his vest and pulled out a pair of metal handcuffs. They clanked together loudly, a chilling sound that sliced through the neighbors' murmurs. The crowd gasped as if they'd all felt the cold bite of those cuffs. "You're under neighborhood arrest," Mark declared, his voice cracking slightly, betraying his bravado. "Don't make me put these on you the hard way." Mr. Carter's eyes locked on the cuffs, then flicked back to Mark's face. He spoke slowly, every word precise. "If you take one more step toward me with those cuffs, you are committing a felony, impersonating an officer, attempted unlawful restraint. That's prison time, Mark, not community service." Mark's grip tightened, but his confidence wavered. His bearded partner, Dave, whispered harshly, "Mark, this is insane. We can't actually cuff him. We'll get locked up ourselves." "Shut up," Mark snapped, his voice carrying across the driveway. Lisa tried desperately to salvage the moment. She raised her chin, projecting her voice for the neighbors. "Don't let him intimidate you. This is a law-abiding community, and we have every right to enforce standards. He's just trying to bully his way out." But her words fell flat. The neighbors were no longer convinced. Murmurs of disapproval rippled across the street. "You don't have the right, Lisa," someone shouted. Another added, "This isn't enforcement, it's harassment." Mr. Carter leaned slightly closer to Mark, his tone quiet but sharp as glass. "I've seen real cuffs, I've used real cuffs, and I know when a man is bluffing. Drop them now before this turns into something you'll never recover from." Mark's jaw worked furiously, his pride warring with the harsh reality sinking in. Dave tugged at his sleeve, his voice trembling. "Come on, man. Cameras are rolling. We'll be fried for this." But Mark shoved him back. "I said I've got this." He stepped forward, thrusting the cuffs out like a weapon. The crowd audibly recoiled, and a woman screamed, "Call the cops." Dozens of phones tilted, capturing every angle of the escalating standoff. Mr. Carter didn't retreat. He didn't flinch. Instead, he squared his shoulders and said in a low, steady voice, "Mark, you're one heartbeat away from utterly destroying your life. Think carefully before you take that step." For the first time, Mark hesitated. Sweat beaded along his forehead, glistening in the Texas sun. His hands shook, just slightly enough for everyone to notice. The authority he had tried so hard to project was cracking like brittle glass under immense pressure. Lisa, desperate to regain momentum, shrieked, "Do it! Don't let him intimidate you! Put him in cuffs! Show this neighborhood who's in charge!" Her words backfired spectacularly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged man from 3 houses down yelled back, "Lisa, you've lost your mind. You're not the police." Others joined in, their voices firmly turning the tide against her. Mr. Carter seized the moment. His voice rose just enough to carry, calm yet powerfully commanding. "Everyone here sees what's happening. This isn't about rules or violations. This is about power. Fake power. And these men are being pushed by someone who doesn't understand the law, doesn't respect the law, and believes intimidation is leadership." Dave dropped his gaze to the ground, shame washing over him. He muttered, "I didn't sign up for that." Mark glared at Dave, then at Lisa, torn between his shattered pride and mounting fear. But before he could decide, Mr. Carter stepped slightly closer, closing the distance between them. His eyes locked onto Mark's, his voice dropping to that chilling register only true professionals possess. "You lay one finger on me, Mark, and I promise you, the real police won't even need to ask me who you are. They'll already know because I'll walk them through every single mistake you've made in the last 10 minutes. You think you're intimidating me, son? I dismantle men like you for a living." The words landed like a hammer blow. Mark froze, his arm locked in place, the cuffs dangling uselessly. The crowd erupted, not with cheers but with a low rumble of approval, voices overlapping. "He's right, leave him alone, you're done." The street itself had chosen sides, and it was not with Lisa or her imposter enforcers. Mr. Carter finally straightened, his body language relaxed but unyielding. "Here's the undeniable truth. This is the end of your little game. You have no authority, you have no power, and the longer you stand here pretending you do, the deeper the hole you're digging." Mark's shoulders sagged, his grip loosening on the cuffs. Dave backed up another step, visibly unraveling. Lisa, however, looked like she might explode, her face flushed crimson, her voice breaking into a shriek. "You don't belong here. You never have. That's why you're fighting so hard. The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. The neighbor's murmurs sharpened into outright outrage. That's enough, Lisa, someone yelled. Another voice louder still. You're exposing yourself. Mr. Carter maintained his composure, but the sting of her words was not lost on him. He looked at her for a long moment, disappointment clear in his eyes. Then he turned back to Mark and Dave. Take my advice. Walk away now, because the next chapter in this story doesn't end with you walking home. It ends with flashing lights, handcuffs, and charges you won't be able to explain away. But Lisa was not ready to quit, and her desperation was about to push the imposters into their most reckless move yet. The standoff had reached its absolute boiling point. Mark still clutched the handcuffs like a lifeline, his arm hovering midair, unable to decide whether to swing or drop them. Dave, whose name Carter had overheard, looked ready to bolt, while Lisa stood at the center of it all, red-faced and trembling with rage, barking orders no one seemed willing to follow anymore. Mr. Carter took a breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone deeply uncomfortable. Then he spoke, his voice neither loud nor threatening, but carrying the unmistakable weight of true authority. Mark, Dave, let me ask you something simple. Do you even understand what happens to a man who impersonates a federal officer? Forget state charges. Forget HOA bylaws. I'm talking about federal law. Do you know the minimum sentence? Mark blinked behind his mirrored shades, his lips parting as if to answer, but no words came. Mr. Carter didn't wait. 3 years. That's the minimum. And that's if you're incredibly lucky. If you escalate, if you touch me, we're talking much more. Assault, false imprisonment, conspiracy. Do the math. Dave's eyes widened, last vestiges of fight draining from him with every word. Lisa, he's not joking, he whispered harshly, but everyone nearby heard it. Lisa snapped back. Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. He just wants you scared so you back down. Mr. Carter shifted his gaze to her, calm but cutting. You've already lost, Lisa. The crowd knows it. Your neighbors know it. And deep down you know it too. The crowd murmured in agreement. A woman holding her toddler muttered, He's right. This is insane. Mark's hand finally dropped, the cuffs hanging at his side like dead weight. But Mr. Carter wasn't finished. He stepped forward, closing the distance, and his tone shifted. Calm, conversational, yet laced with the sharp precision of a man who had stared down cartel lieutenants without breaking a sweat. You know what truly separates real authority from fake authority? Mr. Carter asked, his eyes moving from Mark to Dave to Lisa. It's accountability. Real officers answer to the law. Fake ones answer to their pride. And pride will get you killed or locked up. The line hit Mark like a physical strike. He shifted uncomfortably, sweat dripping down his temple. Mr. Carter continued, his voice carrying for the neighbors still filming. This community deserves better than fear tactics. They deserve honesty. They deserve leaders who solve problems with respect, not intimidation. Lisa let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Respect? Don't you dare lecture me about respect? Do you know how many hours I've poured into this neighborhood? Do you know how many complaints I've had to field? People want order, Reginald. They want someone to stand up and keep things proper. Order doesn't come from force, Lisa. Mr. Carter replied evenly. It comes from trust. And trust vanishes the second you drag in imposters with fake vests and threaten your neighbors. Mark swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe he's right, Lisa. Maybe we should just go. No, Lisa snapped, spinning towards him. If we walk away now, we lose everything. Everyone here sees this. They'll think I can't handle my job. Do you want that? Dave finally spoke louder, his patience completely gone. You think this is about your reputation? I am not going to jail for you, Lisa. I didn't sign up for this mess. He ripped the Velcro patch off his vest and tossed it onto the pavement. The cheap fabric fluttered against the driveway like a confession. Gasps rippled through the neighborhood. Phones zoomed in. The illusion was breaking apart, piece by piece. Mr. Carter's gaze returned to Mark. That's one down. What about you? Mark's hands trembled, the cuffs rattling against his thigh. For the first time, his bravado cracked enough for Mr. Carter to see the truly scared man behind the mirrored shades. Think very carefully, Mark. Mr. Carter pressed, his voice low, almost intimate. Lisa won't be there when the police start asking questions. She won't sit beside you in the courtroom. She won't do your time. She'll save herself. And you? You'll be the one wearing real cuffs. The crowd was utterly silent, hanging on every word. Mark finally let the handcuffs slip from his hand. They clattered against the pavement, the sound ringing louder than Lisa's protests. No, Lisa shouted, stomping her foot like a child denied candy. Pick them up. Don't let him win. But Mark didn't move. He backed away a single step, his chest heaving with the crushing weight of regret. Mr. Carter seized that moment to deliver the final blow. He straightened, looking directly at Lisa. Leadership isn't about winning, Lisa. It's about responsibility. And you have utterly failed yours. The neighbors erupted, not with applause but with a rising tide of voices. He's right. She's gone too far. We don't want this in our neighborhood anymore. Lisa looked around, her face now pale, realizing the power she thought she possessed was slipping through her fingers faster than she could grasp. Mr. Carter bent down, picked up the cuffs Mark had dropped, and held them up for the crowd to see. This is what happens when you confuse control with justice. When you mistake fear for respect. But this isn't justice, it's fraud. The cuffs gleamed in the sun, punctuating his powerful words. But before the neighborhood could fully absorb what had just happened, Mark made one last reckless choice that threatened to turn words into violence. The tension should have shattered when the cuffs hit the ground. But Mark wasn't finished. His pride simply wouldn't allow him to walk away. With sweat dripping down his temple and his chest heaving, he lunged forward, shoving past Dave and closing the gap between himself and Mr. Carter. The crowd gasped in unison. Phones tilted, capturing every angle. Someone screamed, "Don't touch him." But Mark either didn't hear or didn't care. He reached for Mr. Carter's wrist, intent on forcing the cuffs back into play. That was his ultimate, final mistake. In one fluid motion, Carter's elite training kicked in. He sidestepped, seized Mark's arm and twisted it behind his back with surgical precision. The very cuffs Mark had dropped moments earlier were now in Mr. Carter's hands, snapping shut around Mark's own wrists. Before the man could even process what had occurred, Mark cried out, more from shock than pain, and stumbled to his knees. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 breathtaking seconds, and the crowd roared with disbelief. "Did you see that?" someone yelled. Another voice echoed, "He didn't even fight back. He just moved." Mr. Carter didn't gloat. He simply held Mark in place with minimal force, his voice calm, professional, as though conducting routine business. "You're done. Don't resist. It will only make things worse." Lisa's face fessed in horror. "What are you doing? You can't arrest him." Carter's eyes snapped to her, sharp and cold. "You're right, Lisa. I can't arrest him, but I can detain him for impersonating an officer until real law enforcement arrives. And considering he just attempted to assault me on my own property, the charges are rapidly stacking up." The neighbors erupted again. Some clapped. Others shouted in outrage at Lisa. "You set this up. You pushed them too far. This is all on you, Lisa." Dave, who had already stripped off his vest, took several steps back, his hands raised in a surrender. "I'm out. I'm done. I didn't sign up for this." His voice cracked with genuine fear. "Lady, you never told us he was law enforcement." Mr. Carter's voice cut through, calm and steady. "That's because she didn't know." Lisa blinked, momentarily disarmed. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Carter straightened, keeping Mark restrained with one hand. His other hand reached into his back pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open with practiced ease, holding it high enough for everyone, including the dozens of cameras pointed at him, to see the gleaming gold badge in the sunlight. "I'm Special Agent Reginald Carter," he announced, his voice resonating with undeniable authority. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The street fell utterly silent. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and Mark's ragged breathing, as he knelt, cuffed, on the driveway. The neighbors stared, their shock palpable. Miss Miller across the street clutched her husband's arm and whispered, "I knew he carried himself differently." Kyle, the teenager still filming, shouted, "No way. FBI. He's FBI." The phones captured every breathtaking second. The badge, the authority in his voice, the look of utter devastation on Lisa's face, as the truth finally sank in. Mr. Carter's eyes never left her, You came onto my property with imposters, Lisa. You endangered your own neighbors believing intimidation would give you control. But you didn't do your homework. You had no idea who you were truly dealing with. Her lips quivered, but she tried to recover. This is, this is abuse of power. You can't. He cut her off, his voice like cold steel. Abuse of power? That's rich, coming from the woman who staged a fake arrest over an HOA dispute. What I'm doing is lawful. What you did is criminal. The neighbors murmured again, this time with an edge of disgust. Every word Lisa tried to speak only buried her deeper in shame. Mr. Carter adjusted his grip on Mark and addressed the crowd. Let's be absolutely clear. This isn't about lawn height or driveways. It's about people pretending to have authority they don't. People who think fear is leadership. That ends today. Mark groaned, his pride utterly shattered, while Dave stood frozen at the edge of the driveway, looking as if he wanted to melt into the ground. Lisa finally shouted, desperation boiling over. You're making a spectacle of this. You're humiliating me. Mr. Carter's expression softened, though his tone didn't. No, Lisa. You did that yourself. You let pride blind you. You put this entire neighborhood at risk because you couldn't bear the thought of losing control. Phones kept rolling, the evidence undeniable. Mark was breathing heavily now, sweat soaking through his shirt, while Dave looked like he might bolt at any moment. Mr. Carter's badge glinted again in the sunlight, a stark reminder that the game had completely shifted. Here's the part you need to understand, he said, his voice low but carrying. Real power doesn't come from fear. It comes from service, from protecting people, not intimidating them. And when you fake authority, when you cross that line, there's always a reckoning. Lisa shook her head violently, her denial collapsing into a desperate plea. This isn't how it's supposed to go. You weren't supposed to fight back. Mr. Carter met her eyes one final time, and his words landed like a hammer blow. That's because you never expected to meet someone who knows what real authority looks like. The neighborhood fell silent once more, stunned by the revelation. Cameras zoomed tighter. What had begun as a petty HOA stunt was now national news material. But the situation wasn't over yet, because the wail of real police sirens was already echoing down the block, and the truth was about to become official. The unmistakable sound of sirens rolled down the block, sharp and undeniable, cutting through the hot Texas air like a warning bell. Red and blue lights flickered in the distance, growing brighter with each passing second. The neighbors stirred, shifting on their porches and sidewalks, their phones tilting to capture the pivotal moment that would decide how this standoff ended. Mark knelt on the driveway, hands cuffed behind him, his bravado completely evaporated. Dave had retreated to the curb, head in his hands muttering curses to himself, and Lisa, her face pale, her voice shaky, desperately clung to whatever control she imagined she still possessed. You can't do this," she stammered. "The police will side with me. They know me. I'm the president of this HOA." Mr. Carter adjusted his stance, keeping Mark restrained with practiced ease. His voice was steady, As a matter of fact, Lisa, the only thing they'll know is that you called in imposters to intimidate a homeowner, and they'll know because your entire neighborhood watched you do it." He tilted his chin towards the crowd. "Every single phone out here is evidence." Lisa glanced around wildly. It was true. Neighbors on all sides had their cameras up. Some whispered into phones, likely live streaming. Others simply recorded, capturing every word, every flicker of panic on her face. The Millers, still on their porch, shook their heads in disbelief. "She's finished," Mr. Miller muttered. His wife nodded. "It's all on tape." Mr. Carter leaned slightly toward Mark, who was trembling. "Stay still. When the officers arrive, I'll turn you over. Don't make this harder on yourself." Mark didn't argue. His fight was gone, replaced by the chilling dread of what awaited him once the flashing lights reached the driveway. The crowd buzzed louder as the patrol cars finally pulled up. Two of them, tires crunching against the asphalt, as they parked diagonally across the street. Doors opened and uniformed officers stepped out, hands near their belts, eyes meticulously scanning the scene with suspicion. "Hands where we can see them." One officer barked. Mr. Carter immediately raised his free hand, still holding Mark securely with the other. His voice was calm and clear. "Officers, I'm Special Agent Reginald Carter, FBI. Badge in my pocket, identification ready. The man in my custody attempted to impersonate law enforcement and assaulted me on my property." The officers hesitated, their eyes darting from the badge gleaming in Mr. Carter's wallet to the neighborhood full of witnesses. One officer, Officer Davis, a broad man with dark hair, stepped closer, his hand extended. "Let me see your credentials, sir." Mr. Carter nodded slowly, reaching into his pocket and producing his ID. Officer Davis studied it carefully, then looked back at Mr. Carter. Something in his face shifted, respect mixed with palpable relief. "All right," Officer Davis said firmly. "You're good. We'll take him from here." The crowd broke into murmurs again, relief mingling with excitement. Phones zoomed in as the officers lifted Mark to his feet, cuffed behind his back, and walked him toward the squad car. Lisa's voice cracked, desperation pouring out. "Wait, no, he's not the criminal here. Reginald is. He's twisting everything. You have to believe me." Another officer, a younger woman with sharp eyes, Officer Jenkins, stepped toward Lisa. "Ma'am, we've got multiple witnesses, and from what I see, this looks very bad for you. Did you authorize these men to act as law enforcement?" Lisa's mouth opened, but no words came. The crowd murmured louder, neighbors calling out, "She brought them here. We saw it, she told them to arrest him." Officer Jenkins's expression hardened. "Ma'am, you're going to need to step aside. If you continue to interfere, we'll have to treat this as obstruction." Lisa's shoulders slumped, her fight draining away. Her authority, once absolute in the eyes of her HOA board, meant absolutely nothing under the flashing red and blue lights. Mr. Carter maintained his composure, standing tall as Mark was loaded into the back of a squad car. Dave stood off to the side, hands raised nervously, muttering, "I didn't touch anybody. I swear I'm done. I just want to go home." Officer Davis approached him. "We'll need your statement. Don't move." The crowd was no longer silent. Neighbors whispered, cheered softly, or simply stared, unable to believe the dramatic spectacle that had unfolded in their quiet community. Children clung to their parents, eyes wide, absorbing the powerful lesson that authority could be faked and then exposed. Mr. Carter finally spoke, his voice rising just enough for the neighbors to hear. "This is why you don't let fear dictate your choices. Real authority doesn't hide behind fake vests and intimidation. It serves, it protects, and it answers to the truth." The younger officer, Jenkins, glanced at him with something close to admiration before turning back to her unit. Lisa, however, couldn't let go. She shouted one last desperate plea. "You think you've won, Reginald, but people like you don't belong in neighborhoods like this." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some voices shouted back immediately, "That's enough. We all heard you, Lisa. You've lost every ounce of respect." Mr. Carter didn't react with anger. He simply looked at her with quiet disappointment. "You just told everyone exactly who you are, Lisa. And that will stay with you far longer than anything I could ever say." Phones captured her complete collapse, her neighbors turning away from her, shaking their heads, muttering under their breath. Lisa, the once proud HOA president, now stood exposed, isolated, her authority shattered. But as Mark sat in the back of the squad car, and Dave prepared to give his statement, the fallout of Lisa's actions was only beginning, and the neighborhood was about to reckon with the damage she had caused. By the time both patrol cars were parked, and Mark was sitting cuffed in the back of one, the neighborhood had transformed into something akin to a live courtroom. Neighbors clustered at the ends of their driveways, whispering, pointing, filming, their voices a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. The hum of squad radios crackled through the air, blending with the steady wail of a siren still winding down. Officer Davis, the broad-shouldered man who had taken Mr. Carter's ID earlier, stood at the center of the scene, speaking in a low voice with his partner, Officer Jenkins. Every so often, their eyes flicked towards Lisa, who was pacing like a caged animal, muttering under her breath and shaking her head. Mr. Carter stood calm and upright near his front steps, hands clasped loosely behind his back. He hadn't moved since Mark had been loaded into the squad car, and he didn't need to. His stillness radiated more authority than Lisa's frantic pacing ever could. Finally, Officer Davis walked over to him. "Agent Carter, we truly appreciate your cooperation. We've confirmed your credentials with dispatch. From the looks of it, you handled this situation entirely by the book. Mr. Carter gave a slight nod. My primary goal was to prevent it from escalating further. He came at me with cuffs. I had no choice but to detain him until you arrived. Officer Davis sighed. Well, the good news is we've got everything on tape. Between your neighbor's recordings and our body cams, it's a pretty airtight case. Impersonation, unlawful restraint, trespassing, conspiracy. We'll let the district attorney sort out the specific charges. Carter glanced at Lisa, who froze under his gaze. Don't forget instigation, he said evenly. Officer Davis followed his look. Yeah, we're certainly not ignoring her role. He raised his voice towards Officer Jenkins. Bring her over here. The crowd murmured again, buzzing with anticipation. Officer Jenkins approached Lisa. Ma'am, we need to speak with you. Lisa lifted her chin, trying desperately to mask her fear with indignation. This is a total misunderstanding. I was only trying to maintain community standards. That's my job. I didn't commit a crime. Officer Jenkins's tone remained neutral, but firm. Ma'am, your job does not involve authorizing private citizens to impersonate law enforcement. We'll need you to come with us and provide a statement downtown. Gasps rippled across the neighborhood. They're taking her in, someone whispered. Another muttered, about time. Lisa's composure finally cracked. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. Mr. Carter's voice cut through her outburst. Calm but utterly devastating. That title does not place you above the law, Lisa. If anything, it means you should have known better. Phone zoomed in, capturing her face as the harsh truth finally sank in. Officer Jenkins placed a hand gently on her arm, guiding her toward the squad car. She resisted at first, pulling back, but the officer's grip tightened just enough to show she had no choice. The neighbors muttered again, some recording, others whispering as Lisa was escorted past them, her authority stripped away in real time. Dave, still lingering at the curb, spoke up nervously. Am I going to jail too? Officer Davis turned to him. We'll need a full statement from you. Depending on your exact role, that will determine whether charges stick. The best thing you can do is cooperate fully. Dave nodded quickly, wiping sweat from his forehead. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. I didn't want this to go this far. Officer Davis gave him a curt nod before signaling another officer to escort him aside. Carter exhaled slowly, finally letting some of the immense tension leave his shoulders. The neighbors' voices swirled around him, a mix of admiration, relief, and quiet awe. A few clapped softly. One man called out, "You handled that better than anyone else could." He didn't respond to the applause. He simply looked at the officers and asked, "What happens next?" Officer Davis answered, "We'll book Mark and Lisa, get their statements, and file charges. Dave's involvement will depend on what he admits. After that, it's up to the courts. You'll likely be asked to testify." Mr. Carter gave another nod. "That's fine." His eyes swept across the neighborhood, meeting the stares of his neighbors. "The important thing is that this street is safe again." Officer Jenkins stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You know, Agent Carter, we don't usually walk into scenes like this, where the suspect's already cuffed and detained. You made our job a lot easier today." Mr. Carter's tone remained professional. "I didn't want blood on anyone's hands. That's always the goal. Control without chaos." But the irony was not lost on him. The neighborhood was far from calm. For years, Lisa had ruled with an iron fist, disguised as community leadership, and tonight that illusion had shattered in front of every single resident. The Millers whispered to each other, their eyes on Mr. Carter. "He's not just a neighbor anymore," Mrs. Miller said softly. "He's the one who protected us from her." Her husband nodded. "People are going to remember this." As the squad cars prepared to pull away, one carrying Mark and the other Lisa, the crowd lingered, unable to look away. The flashing lights painted the brick homes in red and blue, a stark reminder that their neighborhood had changed forever. In a single afternoon, Mr. Carter stood tall, silent, his gaze fixed on the departing cars. He hadn't asked for any of this, but he knew the fallout was only just beginning. But what no one on that street realized yet was that the aftermath, the profound changes in the days that followed, would transform their community far more than this one dramatic confrontation ever could. The days following the standoff in Plano felt as though the neighborhood was living under a magnifying glass. The flashing lights may have vanished, but the tension lingered, spreading through the block like wildfire. By Sunday morning, everyone had seen the videos. Clips circulated furiously on Facebook groups, shared on Nextdoor, even making their way to local news stations. The headline scrolling across one Dallas news channel screamed, HOA president detained after confrontation with FBI agent neighbor. For neighbors who had silently chafed under Lisa's heavy-handed rule, it felt like profound vindication. Mrs. Miller waved at Mr. Carter from her porch the next morning, her voice carrying across the street. You did this community an immense service, Agent Carter. Don't you ever forget it? Others weren't as vocal, but their glances spoke volumes. Some regarded Mr. Carter with newfound respect, others with a touch of unease, because no one had ever expected that the man who waved politely while mowing his lawn was an FBI agent capable of handling danger with surgical precision. Lisa's absence was glaring. Her house sat dark, the blinds drawn, her car gone. The HOA board sent out a carefully worded email by Tuesday. The association will be conducting a special meeting to address recent events and determine next steps in leadership. Neighbors, of course, read between the lines. Lisa was finished. But the fallout isn't just about Lisa. Mark's mugshot had been plastered across local news sites, his background revealing a trail of minor criminal charges, petty theft, disorderly conduct, unpaid fine. Nothing suggested authority, but everything screamed desperation. Dave, meanwhile, was cooperating fully, providing statements to the police about how Lisa had recruited them with promises of community enforcement pay. He admitted she had stoked their egos, telling them the neighborhood desperately needed strong men to keep people like Reginald in line. The revelation utterly disgusted most neighbors. In hushed conversations over hedges and driveways, the full truth spilled out. Lisa had been complaining about Mr. Carter for months, using coded language, hinting that he simply wasn't a good fit for the neighborhood. By Wednesday, a group of residents gathered in the community park for an informal meeting. Mr. Carter hadn't planned to attend, but when he walked by on his evening jog, the group eagerly waved him over. Agent Carter, one man called out, his tone respectful. We just want to thank you. What you did, it showed us all what was really going on. Mr. Carter slowed, catching his breath, shaking his head slightly. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I live here too. My family lives here, and I wasn't about to let intimidation rule this street. A woman holding her daughter's hand spoke up. But it's bigger than that. You showed us that fear only works if we let it. Lisa has been making people feel small for years, and no one pushed back until you did. Mr. Carter's gaze softened. He crouched slightly so he was eye level with the little girl. That's the most important lesson you need to remember. Bullies gain power when good people stay quiet. But when you stand your ground, when you speak truth, fear loses its grip entirely. The girl smiled shyly, clutching her mother's hand tighter. Word of Mr. Carter's role didn't stay local for long. By Friday, a national morning show picked up the story. The clip of him calmly showing his badge while holding Mark restrained played on a loop, the anchor describing it as a moment where truth powerfully cut through false authority. But Mr. Carter never leaned into the fame. When a reporter stopped by his house for a comment, he politely declined. This isn't about me, he said. It's about accountability. That's the real story. Behind the cameras, however, he couldn't help but reflect on its deeper meaning. For years, his work at the Bureau had focused on dismantling networks far larger and more dangerous than one overzealous HOA president. Yet here on his very own street, he'd faced something just as corrosive, misused power dressed up as leadership. At the next HOA meeting, the board voted unanimously to remove Lisa from her position. Her chair sat empty, a stark symbol of her devastating fall. A new president was chosen, someone quieter, humbler, someone who promised transparency and collaboration. Still, the wound lingered. The neighborhood wasn't going to forget the day its leader had tried to weaponize fake authority against one of their own. Parents discussed it with their kids. Teachers at the local elementary school even used it as a powerful example in class discussions about honesty and responsibility. For Mr. Carter, the fallout was less about Lisa's downfall and more about the crucial conversations it sparked. Neighbors who had barely spoken to one another were suddenly talking about what community truly meant, what genuine leadership should look like, and why accountability mattered above all else. One evening, as he stood watering his front lawn, Kyle, the teenager who had live-streamed the entire incident, approached him. Mr. Carter, he said, a touch of boyish awe in his voice. That video's at 1 million views now. People keep saying you're a hero, Mr. Carter smiled faintly. I'm not a hero, Kyle. I'm just a man who refused to be bullied. Kyle tilted his head, thoughtful. Yeah, but you showed us all how to do it. Mr. Carter looked down the street where children were riding bikes again, and neighbors chatted on porches. The block wasn't perfect, but it felt lighter now, freer somehow. Maybe that's the real win, he said quietly. But even as peace returned to the street, Mr. Carter knew there was still one more profound lesson to share. The kind of truth that could outlast any HOA rule or neighborhood feud. Saturday morning dawned again, precisely 1 week after the confrontation that had shaken the neighborhood to its core. The air was calmer, the lawns freshly cut, children racing their bikes without parents peering nervously through blinds. Yet the echoes of that dramatic day still lingered. Every time someone passed Mr. Carter's driveway, they glanced at it like a historic landmark, the place where truth had stood taller than intimidation. Mr. Carter himself maintained his simple routine. He walked out with his morning coffee, leaned against the railing of his porch, and watched the block stir awake. He hadn't sought out attention, but the neighborhood gave it to him anyway. A neighbor waved as she loaded groceries into her car. A man mowing his lawn raised a hand in thanks. Even people who had never spoken to him before now offered nods of acknowledgement. But Mr. Carter didn't bask in it. He wasn't wired that way. What occupied his mind wasn't pride. It was the essential lesson he wanted his community to carry forward. That afternoon, the HOA board called a special neighborhood gathering in the community park. Word spread quickly, and nearly every household sent someone. Families sat on folding chairs, children ran in the grass, and a powerful sense of anticipation filled the air. When Mr. Carter arrived, conversations hushed. He wasn't there as an official speaker, just as a neighbor. But Harold Green, the quiet man who had just been voted interim president, asked him to address the group. Mr. Carter hesitated at first, then stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice much, but the crowd leaned in, hanging on his every word. Last week, he began, his voice resonating with quiet authority. We all witnessed what happens when authority is faked, when power is wielded to intimidate instead of protect. And the truth is, it could have gone very, very differently. Someone could have been seriously hurt. Kids were watching. Phones were recording. Lives could have been ruined far worse than they already were. He paused, scanning the faces, some solemn, some curious, some deeply ashamed. What I want you to take away from that moment isn't about me. It isn't about the FBI. It's about the kind of neighborhood we all aspire to live in. Do we want fear to govern our street, or do we want respect and accountability to guide us? Murmurs of heartfelt agreement rippled through the crowd. Mr. Carter continued, his voice gaining a quiet strength. Leadership isn't about control. It's about service. And service means putting people first, even when it's inconvenient, even when you don't get credit. That's the fundamental difference between true authority and mere arrogance. A hand shot up from the back. It was Mrs. Miller, her voice strong despite her age. Agent Carter, what should we do the next time someone tries something like this? Mr. Carter didn't hesitate. Stand together. Speak up. Never let fear isolate you. The only reason those imposters had any chance at all was because they believed this neighborhood would stay silent. Silence is what bullies feed on. But when you speak truth, when you shine a bright light on lies, the game ends. The crowd clapped softly, then louder, as the profound message settled in. Parents nodded, whispering to their children. The teenagers, including Kyle, filmed from the back, capturing every word for a new live stream. Mr. Carter looked down at Kyle. You keep posting those videos, young man, but make absolutely sure they're not just about drama. Use your platform to spread truth, to show people what accountability truly looks like. Kyle grinned. Yes, sir. That's the plan. As the gathering ended, people lingered, talking with one another more genuinely than they had in years. Strangers introduced themselves, shaking hands, asking about families. The tension that had once defined their street seemed to dissolve into something else entirely: connection. Later that evening, Mr. Carter returned home. The sun was setting, casting a golden, peaceful light across the quiet block. He stood for a moment at the end of his driveway, the very spot where everything had gone down just days earlier. The memory of Mark's cuffs, Lisa's shouts, and the flashing red and blue lights was still vivid. But now that space symbolized something entirely different, a profound turning point. He thought back to his years in the bureau, the endless briefings about criminal networks, the dangerous missions, the times he had stared into the eyes of men who lived on fear and power. And it struck him with stunning clarity that sometimes the battles that mattered most weren't fought in foreign cities or dark alleys. They were fought right at home, on the familiar streets where children played and families built their lives. He whispered quietly to himself, almost as a prayer, "The truth always comes to light." The sound of children laughing down the block pulled him back to the present. He smiled faintly, picked up the empty trash can by the curb and walked it back to his garage. Because life was moving forward. And that, he realized, was the whole point. For those who had watched the standoff unfold, the moral was now crystal clear. Real power comes not from empty titles, intimidation or fear, but from honesty, from accountability, and from the unwavering courage to stand firm when it matters most. If you're watching this story right now, ask yourself, in your own community, in your own life, are you building with fear or with respect? Are you staying silent, or are you speaking truth when it's hardest? That's the choice each of us faces, whether we wear a badge or not. So if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about leadership, community, and the true meaning of authority, make sure to subscribe, because stories like this remind us all that sometimes the fight for justice happens right where we live.